Welcome to Patriot Radio America. And now your host, Tony Breitling.
Hello everybody, Bob Adams here. Welcome to episode 18. Tony and I have been working on a couple different projects this last little while, and as you watch the news, you realize there's so much going on still, and the Comey mess and other things that are happening out there that are quite fascinating, and I know that Tony's got some great stuff prepared for you today. So Tony, are you ready?
Yep.
All right, I'm doing really well. I'm excited. It's nice to have summer here, where it's nice and cool on the Oregon coast. Oh, I'm sorry, I wasn't able to bring that up, was I, Tony? I know. I realize I've been there in Arizona, and I've experienced that 114 degree weather, and you're doing 100 plus. You can have it all. Woo! No thanks.
Yeah, it's pretty bad this year. It's a couple days ago it was 120, which is very rare in Scottsdale, where I was originally from, Lake Havasu. It's no problem. That like every 2-3 years it'll do that, and I grew up in it. I'm used to it, but not here in Scottsdale. People aren't used to it, so it's pretty bad.
Yeah, I remember. Anyway, I know you've got some hot topics to cover besides the weather, so have at it, my friend.
Hey, thanks, Bob. I'm going to go over a couple articles here, but the main thing I want to do today is just kind of do a little bit of a lot of people have been asking me, not specifically what's going on with Comey, but the situation. Will Trump, because the last audio that I put out, or at least the last two audios that Bob and I put out, I talked about the legal issues that were coming at Trump, and there's absolutely no way he can get in trouble. It's just impossible. That's why his lawyers, here's what's interesting is you have the Attorney General, and then you have the people that are under him. And you guys, that's because of the situation on how the investigation was going on and how different people were involved. Trump couldn't have them as lawyers traditionally, and that's what their job was. So that's why he had to go out and get lawyers that could basically say the easiest thing: so Trump's not being investigated. Twice now, we find out that he's not being investigated. So that's pretty bad. But what I wanted to do is I just wanted to do a little bit of a question and answer period here at the end of this. But let me read this article for you guys real quick. Public accounts by friends show James Comey leaked while FBI director. Now we know this, but this one's a little bit different. James Comey may have misled senators on May 3rd when he testified to the Senate Judiciary Committee that he had never been an anonymous source in news reports related to the Russia investigation. By that time, he had already leaked several private conversations he had with the President Trump to his friend Benjamin, I think it's Whitey's, right, Bob? Is that what we determined?
Yeah, I believe that's correct.
Whitey's. Yeah, Whitey's, editor-in-chief of the blog Lawfare and former editorial writer for the Washington Post. So Whitey's wrote in his place in a piece on May 18th, only 9 days after Comey was fired, that the former FBI director had shared those conversations over the previous few months. So he already gave a testimony. He's not part of the FBI or anything like that. He had been sharing, and you guys, it's not, this is what people, it kind of upsets me a little bit because I'm a conservative, and, Trump's a part of the team right now. Trump's not a traditional conservative like my group is. Like I said, we've been kicking butt for 12 years, long before Trump ever showed up. So this isn't, Trump's a telling of it. I'm glad he's there because he would have done things that Mitt Romney or Newt Gingrich, or maybe not Newt Gingrich, but all these other guys would have never been able to do. He doesn't care. He just is like, look, I'm going to do it. And so he put it out there, but people aren't defending him incorrectly. It's not that they're against him or anything like that. For some reason, it's not connecting together. But it's not the idea that Comey gave Whitey's this information. It was leaked to the Washington Post or whatever. It was the idea that he gave it to him, period. That's what people don't understand. Just giving it to that guy is illegal. And what did he indicate? I'll read this again. Whitey's wrote in a piece on May 18th, only 9 days after Comey was fired, that the former FBI director had shared those conversations. Over the previous few months, he wrote, Comey never told me the details of the dinner meeting. I don't think I've even knew that there had been a meeting over the dinner until I learned it from the Times stories. But he did tell me in general terms that early on Trump had asked for loyalty and that Comey had promised him only honesty. He also told me that Trump was perceptually uncomfortable with this answer. So it's kind of strange. If you go look on, if you guys just go on YouTube, you can go look and where he's talking about he talked about how Comey was upset because Trump embraced him and all that stuff, and talking about, these guys, different commentators talking about how Trump, it looks like, on the outside, it was some type of nice approach. But what happens is, people like Trump who are alpha males, they want to get close to show you, even if they embrace you with a hug or something like that. I know that sounds strange, but it's true that, he's the boss. It's like, it's like, no, he didn't do that. But he did end up showing Comey who's the boss because he fired his ass. But it's the leaks is the release of unauthorized information, according to the definition by the George Washington University professor, a legal scholar, Jonathan Turley. Incidentally, there is no condition that the information may be published or distributed via a physical memo. And Benjamin, the gentleman that Comey leaked this to, is arguably a member of the news media. In January, Whitey's published a piece on Comey in Lawfare. That's his blog. So you guys, it's media. I mean, and he writes and publishes pieces regularly. It would not have been unreasonable for Comey to think Whitey's could publish a piece on this conversation, on their conversations in the future, which is exactly what happened. Whitey's not only wrote about the loyalty conversation with Trump in his May 18th blog post titled What James Comey Told Me About Donald Trump, but he also wrote about contacting the New York Times as a source to share what Comey had told him. He also discussed contacting New York Times in a BuzzFeed interview. So, it's very simple, you guys. Comey's in trouble. That's what I'm trying to tell you. And what's interesting, the reason I wanted to bring this up, it's not the idea that we're keeping watching this as it progresses, but people were asking me, it's like, how did you know? Because before this stuff came up, how did you know? You said that, watch, you guys are going to find out that Comey is the leaker. It's because you guys, all the information that through this investigation, it all ends up on his desk. There's only one person that can put all this together. There's only one person that could have the power of omission and not tell anybody what they tried to sabotage Trump by saying that, not telling people that he was under investigation. Now you have senators that are guilty of that, knowing that he was not being investigated, but they one of them even said that he was being investigated. I don't have the name in front of me. So that was the game. And sometimes it works. This time it didn't. But he's in trouble. Comey's in legal trouble. That's why he's going to the New York Times and he's trying to find a way out. But he's going to get himself in trouble because he can't be bouncing his own conversations back and forth, what he said and what he didn't say. The best thing to do is just disappear and don't say anything and get a team of lawyers behind you. Obviously, he's not equipped for that. But, I remember, you probably remember this, but I don't know how you watched the Comey hearings. But, you had all these talking heads on like Fox News and CNN and all that stuff talking about how, this guy's sharp as a tack and, just his reputation and showing up to the hearings is bad for Trump. And it turned out being a huge disaster. Find out the guy was a goof. All Trump had to do, and this is exactly what he said. Comey said, not in this context, but Comey said that he woke up one night, he just was sitting there staring at the ceiling, woke up in a big ball of sweat that, hey, I don't have anything here to protect myself with. You know why he woke up and said that to himself? Is because Donald Trump laid a little trap for him. Donald Trump just out there and asked the question, made a statement. You better hope there's no tapes that was recording that conversation. And that's what forced Comey to actually change things. That's what actually outed him, was that, I mean, I don't know if Trump did it on purpose. I don't know if the guy's a genius or what, but he put him in such a horrible corner that, he's going to get in trouble. That's why Comey's in trouble. And that's what actually, kind of shined the light on him, was Trump saying, hey, maybe there's some recorded tapes out there, or recordings of this conversation. Well, if there is, then Comey's in trouble. That's what he said earlier. So that's why he retracted on, started messing around with the dates, and he's not being investigated. Was there anything that had to do with the Russian, he never said anything, but again, omission. You guys, it's a powerful tool. It's a sin. If you're a Christian, you study the law and stuff like that, omission's a sin. So look it up. I mean, there's different cases that you can look at on how that works, but it means something. So let me jump into this real quick, because, over time, what Trump gets accused of and what happens, the liberal media tries to pile it on him. And with all this false accusations, or this didn't happen, or that's stupid, or whatever, and the guy ends up being right every single time, and then he's able to protect himself every single time. So here's the thing, what the left doesn't realize, the left media, is that people aren't buying it anymore. What do you think these these special elections, why the Republicans keep winning? You guys nobody's buying it anymore. Nobody wants to be part of a radical feminist party, and they think that people out there do. They're still Democrats, and they have principles, and they have their own ideas on how things, and they're left to the left of me, but they're not radical. None of my friends, I keep telling people here in Phoenix, I have some friends that are, they're Marxist. They believe in it, but none of them are radical. That sounds strange to some conservatives, like, well, that sounds radical. They're not. They're very nice people. They have fantastic families. They have fantastic educations. They're very, very respectful. They wouldn't hurt anybody. And so that's what's going on with the Democrat Party, is they let their voice is a bunch of nutcases, and it's running the old Democratic Party. And so they don't know how to fix it. You know why? Because the people who are the ones who should be guarding the party from that are the ones who are yelling this garbage the most. So they need to get rid of them. Me and Bob had a conversation before we had this audio, and I'll talk about it here in a minute. But I want to get into this article because evidence Trump was right about illegal voting. Now, I want to tell you guys, remember, Trump's been in politics for less than 7 months. Now, I know he ran in the Republican primaries, but I'm talking about an elected official, for 7 months. And so we've known this probably for 6 years. 6-7 years. Before we got these numbers, we suspected already. Next thing you know, that the numbers started coming out on illegal voting, and the next thing you know, certain states that are trying to protect that started giving out license. So they were creating a layer for where Republicans couldn't investigate or conservatives investigate, and so they hid, just like what they're trying to do right now with ICE and the immigration. All the immigration that we're trying to enforce through ICE and the Border Patrol. What are these cities doing? They're basically not giving ICE the information on when, like the gangs that they're releasing and all that stuff. So they can't grab them and then, kick them out of our country. They're protecting them that way. They're creating a layer. Well, it was the same thing with voting. And people don't realize this because it was just, if back in those days, when this was going on, you guys, the conservative media has progressed as far as its size and what we're able to do. I remember it was just a couple radio stations back in the 80s and stuff like that. It just did not exist. So if it wasn't talked about, that's why they sweep it under the rug. Just don't talk about it. Nobody will know about it. If nobody knows about it, they can't come after us. And that's always been their plan. That's always been their play. Well, they can't do that anymore. So it's not that Trump is the article is wrong. Trump did throw that stuff out there, but he got those numbers from the conservatives like me who've been watching these numbers, probably since the mid 90s, when I got into this stuff. But anyways, let me read this. Rush. This is Rush Limbaugh, by the way, and this is up on his website. Actually, if you can't find it on his website, I think I got this off Breitbart. But anyways, Bob will have the link for it. And Rush says, remember leading up to the presidential election in November that Donald Trump alluded to the fact that there might be as many as 2 million or millions of illegal alien votes. And do you remember the reaction from the Democrats and the media? It was like a bunch of stuck pigs in a barnyard on a way to a slaughterhouse that had just figured out what was happening. They went bananas. and they said, this is outrageous. This is outrageous. Trump is tampering with the election with Russia, and now he's claiming that illegals are voting. This is outrageous. This is irresponsible. Trump is destroying our democracy, blah, 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 blah. And all the while, none of them could say that it wasn't true. Nobody could say it wasn't true. So there's this thing at the time the Democrats were accusing Russians of tampering with or hacking the election. Trump comes along and says, yeah, there may be as many as 2 million illegals voting, Democrats say. No way, it's not possible. You remember this, and I'm sure you do, because you guys, I'm paraphrasing Rush here, but it was one of those many incidents. Trump had said something, get the reaction from the Democrats, and the media was, see, I'm telling you, this guy is insane. This guy is unfit. So let me move a little bit forward here, though. Let me see if I can find this. Research group in New Jersey has taken a fresh look at the post-election polling data, concluding that the number of non-citizens voting in the U.S. elections is likely far greater than previous estimates. As many as 5.7 million non-citizens may have voted in the 2008 election, which put Barack Obama in the White House. The research organization Just Facts, a widely cited independent think tank led by self-described conservatives and libertarians, revealed its number crunching and report on national immigration. Just Facts, President James D. Agresti and his team looked at data from an extensive Harvard YouGov study that every 2 years questions a sample size of tens of thousands of voters. Remember the Harvard YouGov study that contained a lot of data shocking to Democrats. I can't remember anything off the top of my head, but I'll be able to dig it up. I remember these reports because that's what I was talking about. A lot of this has to do with before Trump ever even decided to run for president of the United States. Anyways, they're able to dig this up because we were reported on 2 or 3 elements of the Harvard study. And it is thousands of people, which is one of the reasons it's paid so much close attention. And it revealed some really shocking things to left-wing conventional wisdom. I promise I'll dig some of this stuff up. So the thing about it is, you guys, I'll let you guys read it. I'll read one more part here. The ODU professor who stands by their work in the face of attack from the left concluded in 2008 as few as 38,000 and as many as 2.8 million non-citizens voted. That's a big range. The president of Just Facts, the think tank doing all this, that analysis of the same polling data settled on much higher numbers. He estimated that as many as 7.9 million non-citizens were illegally registered to vote in 2008, and from 594,000 to 5.7 million voted. So you guys, look, it's not in the hundreds of thousands. I guarantee you it's in the millions. But here's the point. Back in those days, you had Acorn and you had all these, they were getting the vote out. They weren't getting the vote out. Everybody who's pretty much conservative in the United States is already conservative. They're not going to change. Everybody who's liberal or Democrat or a moderate or a libertarian, you guys are not changing from one election to the next. They did this election because that's how Trump got voted in, because they don't believe the liberals anymore. That's the point. But the liberals know this. So what do? They took our money, your money, my money, and went out and tried to get people so-called register the vote. Well, that's what they were after. They were after the non-citizens. That's why they wanted, they turned it into a weapon. They weaponized it. They weaponized illegal aliens. And guess what? It worked. It worked. Well, unfortunately, go ahead, Bob.
Well, I was going to say, yeah, that does work. It's kind of interesting, too. But one of the things that also does work is we get to stick an ad in. So, folks, hang on.
Sure.
Is your retirement plan working for you? Do you have a retirement account that's just not giving you the growth you need? With the help of Mountain West IRA, you can use your retirement account to invest in real estate, promissory notes, private companies, precious metals like gold and silver, even foreign currencies. Mountain West IRA is a family-owned and operated company, so we understand the needs of families like yours. That's why we offer very competitive fees, weekly education, and personalized service to meet your individual needs and goals. Our expert and knowledgeable staff have been working with individuals and small businesses for more than a decade. Schedule a free consultation by calling toll-free 866-377-3311, 866-377-3311, or visit mountainwestira.com. Mountain West IRA, the ultimate retirement machine.
You know, the main point is that you guys, I said this in the last couple audios, you know, now they're coming up with the numbers. You know, so you had a bunch of Democrats out there saying, you know, there's probably voters that are non-citizens or people that are non-citizens that are voting. It's like, yeah, no kidding. But it's probably not as much as you think it is. It's like, no, it's, you know, all you have to do is look at the driver's license they're giving to non-citizens in California. What do you need to vote in California? A driver's license. That's all you need. That pretty much narrows that down. That's why it's a big sham. That's why they set it up that way. They did that, and they tried to do it in Utah. And I think they did it in Utah, and they stopped it somehow. I could be wrong about that, but I know there was something going on in Utah. The same thing. You know, there's a little bit of shenanigans going on. I know they did in California. I know they're doing it in New Mexico. And so it just, you know, that's the game. But here's the point. You know, from state to state election, it doesn't hurt me. But in a national election, they're stealing my vote. They're stealing your vote. You know, we were able to beat them, you know, because the Democrats, they actually did what they say they're going to do, and they brought in so much foreign workers that actually hurt the American workforce, and they made them pay this last election. Democrats who lost their jobs is the ones who took Trump to the victory, basically he won because of that. And you guys, there's not enough Republicans in this country. If you were to take the non-citizens that voted, and then you take the Democrats, and then you take the liberals who they were going to vote for, the independents, there's not enough Republicans. Not even close. So there had to have been a lot of Democrats to vote. It wasn't a small group. It wasn't a small, you know, but like I said, I have friends here in the Phoenix area. They lost their jobs at Intel. It's like, oh, what'd they do? Is somebody competing against you guys? There's not as much. They're like, no, we've got more business than ever. It's just that, you know, you can bring some punk in from India, and then, you know, the guy, not only does he take half of what your pay is, but they don't have to pay taxes. They don't have to pay Social Security. They don't, you know, they don't have to pay insurance. You know, so they're, you know, I'm done. I'm over with. It's like, well, maybe you should probably vote for the guy who's going to try to bring in jobs and stop that. Yeah, there's a good idea. So, you know, I didn't say that, you know, I'm being sarcastic here, but I just remember a couple of them after the election. It's like, you know, slapping them on the back. It's like, so you pissed? Like, no, I voted for Trump. So you got to be kidding me. You know, I've known you for 15 years. You know, you're not liberal. You're Marxist, I guess. So what'd you vote for Trump for? It's like, dude, they got rid of my job. You know, I get it. It's like, huh. Strange. But, you know, so here's the thing. You look at this last election that we had, Democrats made all kinds of mistakes. And I'm going to say this in regards, and I've said this before, but I'm going to throw it a little bit different angle because I have a lot of conservative friends that kind of watch. You know, you guys, I'm not able to talk about half of the numbers or the techniques on what we do because it's too complex. People will literally shut the program off because it's just, you know, it's a lot of nerd stuff. But, you know, people appreciate the numbers. You have a group here in Phoenix that watch what I talk about and reflect and use the numbers as a utility on giving you guys the message what's going on. But the reality is that the Democrats, if they want to fix themselves, you know, one of the things that they did incorrectly is this Georgia election. You guys, they put everything on the line. It's not the idea of the effort. You know, the effort is fine. Putting as much money as they can into it to get their candidate to win is fine. But the rhetoric that they used, the language, this is a mandate. You know, if they win, you know, this is it. You guys, it was a Republican stronghold. And it doesn't make any sense. So if they would have just said, look, it's a Republican stronghold, and we're going to try to do as best as we can. They should have said, we'll probably lose this election by 10 points, knowing that they could, they're only going to lose by 1 or 2 points. And if they lost by 1 or 2 points, they can tell the media it was a huge victory. They're gaining in a Republican stronghold. This is how stupid they are. They don't have any strategy, nothing. They're ruining themselves because they got a bunch of nut jobs at the top. Bob and I was talking about, there's a friend that's, he's actually from back east, and he's in Tucson visiting some friends. And he texted me earlier this morning. He looks like, Harry Reid's gone, and now we're going to get rid of Nancy Pelosi, it looks like. And then, what do you think about Chuck Schumer? It's like, we don't want these people gone. These people have been getting their asses kicked for the last 12 years. What do you want to do? Put a bunch of winners in there? I thought you were conservative. I'd have belt you in the face, And he's laughing. He's like, I didn't think of it that way. But the reality is these people are letting the wrong people in the door. You can have people that disagree with conservatives and win. But what they're going to have to say is like, okay, those guys can provide jobs, but we can provide more. You can't do that when you're a Marxist liberal. You can't say that because creating more jobs is you're hurting Mother Earth. And if that's your message, there's nowhere to go from there. That's the end of it. It's over with. That's why the liberals are in trouble. That's why the Democrat Party is in trouble, because they're not listening to anybody. They're not even listening to people like me giving them fair advice. They won't. I mean, they're not going to do it. They're right. They're smarter than everybody. It just doesn't work. So the Dems are making a huge mistake by going after Trump, because the reality is, you guys, what did I keep telling you? Trump's only been in office for, I think, under 7 months. So they can't use that as an angle of an attack. If the Republicans have been defeating them for the last 12 years, we took over the House, the Senate, the state senates, the state houses, the governorships. We've taken over everything. That campaign started 12 years ago. But what ignited it, though? Think about this. If go back in the map that I talked about, I think there's 13 more million registered Democrats than Republicans nationally. So how are the Republicans doing it? What happened? You guys, a model has already been laid in front of you. Bill Clinton, when he became president, he tried to pass, very socialist style reforms and, all kinds of stuff. Social Security, welfare. Remember Hillary and all that, healthcare, everything. Try to do what Obama did. What happened? This is his first term. But what happened during that time? The conservatives won. They took over. That's where Newt Gingrich did the deal with America, because Americans don't want to see that. So what was the nail on the liberals' coffin? They jumped up, they cheered, hallelujah to the Marxist God and to, Mother Earth and all that stuff. And then he started passing the legislation he promised he said he was going to pass. He fulfilled his promises. He's a man of his word. But that's the problem. Everybody's seen it. Everybody's seen this. And then we've been winning ever since. The conservatives have been winning ever since. It's that simple. So the liberals can't figure out that what they're doing and that what they're voting on is causing them. They need to back off. Use the tactic that, like this Joe Scarborough guy. What did he do? He ran as a Republican in Florida. He's been a liberal his whole life. You don't just switch one day. Every time Trump does something good, this guy ends up crying on TV and he's supposed to be a Republican. Well, that's not the reality. The reality is he ran as a Republican because he knew he would be able to win if he did that. So, you want to try to start using those tactics. But if you go directly against Republicans, you go directly against their policy, you're going to lose. And you're going to lose big time. Not only that, but if you're a Democrat, don't go directly after a conservative and conservative ideas in a conservative stronghold, for the love of Pete. So they're doing everything wrong. And why are Democrats losing? Because the American people aren't fooled anymore. They've seen it. They've seen the results. There's nothing else to hide. You go back and you look at Democrats and the radicals within the Democrat Party. And so what was it, back in the days, don't use the S word. We are no longer socialists because obviously Americans don't vote for that. And they found that out through Ronald Reagan. They thought they had the Democrat Party and, they found out there's a lot of Democrats that voted for Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan was an ex-Democrat. Trump's an ex-Democrat. So it's, and that's how it works. And next thing you know, they're progressives, they're liberals, or, we don't say that we're Marxists anymore. We say that we're progressives. And guess what? That's going to go away. And then it's like, well, we're just liberals, libertarians in general. You guys, they're going to run that. But there's nowhere for them to go now. That's the problem. They've went as far as they can go. And so what are they doing? They're looking for that voice. And what's the loudest voice for them right now is radical everything. We hate men. We hate Christians. We hate America. We hate cars. We hate progress. We hate jobs. That's all you hear. What they don't realize is that there's a bunch of Democrats out there. This isn't the Republicans. There's a bunch of Democrats that are going, I'm married to a male, and I actually love the guy, and I have a job. And if I don't have a job, I want a job, and I want a good job. And you guys are going against all that. That's why feminism is dying, because it went from women equal pay and equal say, equal vote. All of it's moral. All of it's correct. They should, and it should be that way. And the West will always be ahead of everybody else because we believe that, because we want to be able to treat our women equal. But it changed from that. It changed from, men are just jerks because of something that happened in the 1800s. Like, okay, that's interesting. How do you ask for forgiveness for that? Even if it was true, you can't. So it leaves nowhere to go. That's why people are dropping these nuts, because there's nothing you can do. There's nothing to say. It's like, okay, what's your point? Well, we want equal pay. All right. So, what next? There's literally nowhere to go because nobody disagrees with them on this stuff. I don't know any guy out there, any Christian or anybody saying, we should probably give them 30% less, or we should, there's nobody out there saying this stuff. There's no book. It's like Trump's racism. Where did Trump say anywhere? Well, it was the suggestions. Well, the idea that he doesn't want illegals to come up to the United States. How the hell is that racist? The Mexicans, is that a race? I didn't know that. Did you know that, Bob? Did you know Mexicans is a race? I didn't know that. I thought it was a country.
No,
it doesn't make any sense.
Did not have them as that way at all. But I do know this much, Tony. Guess what time it is? All right, folks, hang on. We'll be back in a minute. You bet. Here we go.
Everybody faces the inevitables, death and taxes. But what about the greatest fear of all, outliving your retirement? How much is enough when facing the desires, health considerations, and legacy of your life? Do you have enough set aside or invested to meet your personal goals? And when should you get serious about it? If your answer is now, then welcome to SimTrade Pro, your only source for the fastest investment programs, retirement, and tax planning resources. SimTrade Pro offers options to achieve, protect, and retain the financial security you need to make your golden years a reality. That's www.simtradepro.com. The funny name, with all the answers.
I wanted to throw one more thing out here, and then I want to get to this article that I've been dying. I sent it to Bob, and I've been talking to a couple phone calls with Bob on some people that the White House invited and talked about a little bit on strategy, on insight on strategy, using the Greeks, the ancient Greeks, which is remarkable because I've been studying this stuff my whole life, you guys, and it is fun. And there's a probably for you guys a life-changing point to all this. So I'm going to open up a little bit on a little bit of the knowledge on how this stuff works, strategy or strategic theory. Where does our elite get their strategy and their theories from? How do they put policy together and based on this stuff? What are they able to do? The stuff the average person doesn't know about, or how it's put together. So we'll talk about that a little bit. But the main thing that I wanted to be able to talk about here, you guys, is that Marxist ideology has been put on the table in the House and the Senate, and the American people have rejected it twice now. We've rejected it twice, and it's that simple. Bill Clinton tried to do it, and with Hillary's help, and the next thing you know, Obama tried to do it with Hillary's help. That'll give you guys a clue, right? And so that's what's going on, and that's why the Democrats are in trouble. They need to be moderate Democrats. They need to start running generals, military generals who are Democrats, for top seats in the House, or I'm sorry, in the Senate, or for the president. These other guys who helped Obama, they're not going to make it in any way, shape, or form. They need people that most people never even heard of before. They have to do it. That's the only way they can shake up. That's the only way the Democrats can save themselves is if they do that, because you look at what the public in America can see, and window shopping. All you have to do is go back and look at what Americans seen and then how they vote when they've seen it. It is that simple. It is that simple. So, I hope the Democrats, I'm a conservative, and but I hope they take heed, because you guys are in trouble. But you know what, Bob? I don't want Nancy Pelosi to leave. I don't want Chuck Schumer to leave. I was disappointed Harry Reid left, because those guys are born losers, and they helped the Republicans come in power. So that's the last thing I want to do, is be able to get rid of them. So let me jump into this real quick. Report, and I found this we'll put the link up. I want you guys to read this, because this will open up your minds. I'm using this, I'm staging this to be able to open up some of the books that I'm putting together. And you guys, if I don't put if my book, I change it so much, because I want everything to be able to be provable, or the argument that proves it, or the evidence that, people who've talked to me know. You know what I mean? I'm kind of a perfectionist when it comes to that stuff. That's my talent. So what I might do is, before I'm done with this book, is I actually might just put a report out, and it's not necessarily the information, but the techniques on strategic thinking, strategic theory, and what it is that you need to study so you can build and have the tools in front of you so you can do an analysis or a net assessment on something. What does that mean? What does that even mean? I keep talking about empirical data. A couple audios me and Bob put together, I talked about the difference between the average person, even if they're smart, and the elite, is the elite know how to measure. The average person, or the average person on the planet, they're given knowledge. They don't even really know where it came from. They might know, what type of math was used to get it or whatever, but they have no tools to be able to go out and get that information. They just simply don't. The elite do. And so what do they do? Different perspectives on like if you're going to measure from the Earth to the moon or something like that. But what about politics? What about military strategy? Military strategy is based on politics. And so you go down the line. So let me read this real quick. You guys will love it. Report: Trump's White House turns to ancient Greek historian for insight on U.S.-China relations. Trump administration officials are seeking insight into the U.S.-China relations. Bob?
Yeah, you're okay. Go ahead.
Trump administration's officials are seeking insight into U.S.-China relations from an unlikely source. The ancient Greek historian Thucydides, who chronicled the Peloponnesian War between Athens and Spartan. So let me read this to you guys, because this is very important. You might want to write this name down. It's Thucydides, and it'll actually be the beginning. Understanding who this gentleman is, what he did, is the beginning of a phenomenal education for you. And our top generals go through this program to be able to figure out what it is they need to do, how to do it, and reference. So that's why Trump brought these guys in, or this gentleman in. Michael Crawley reports to Politico magazine that Professor Graham Allison of the Harvard Kennedy School met with Trump's National Security Council staffers last month to discuss the Thucydides trap, a term he coined to explain how the fear, someone actually got the name wrong right here, but anyways, telling what made war inevitable was the growth of Athens' power and the fear which was caused in Sparta. According to Crowley, the Peloponnesian War enthusiast in Trump's White House includes Chief Strategist Steve Bannon, National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster, Defense Secretary James Mattis, and National Security Council spokesman Michael Anton, who during 2016's campaign wrote in the Journal of American Greatness under the pen name, it doesn't have it here. It's blank. I think it's colored. My printer doesn't print that color. Anyways, Bannon Crowley noted once penned an opt-in for Breitbart, comparing the conservative media rivalry between Breitbart and Fox News to the Peloponnesian Wars, casting Breitbart as a disciplined warrior state of Sparta challenging the Athenian Fox. anyways, the subject of the Professor Allison meeting with Trump's officials was America's rivalry with China, cast through the lens of ancient Greeks. The 77-year-old Allison is the author of the recent book based on the writings of Thucydides, the ancient historian famous for his epic chronicles of the Peloponnesian War between the Greek states and Athens and Sparta. Allison cites the Greeks' scholars' summation. Bob?
Yeah, go ahead. You're fine. Keep going.
Yeah, I can't hear anything on my end. There's blowers. I don't know if you know that. Can you hear anything?
Nope, nothing at all. You're good.
Okay. Summation of why the two powers fought. What made wars inevitable with the growth of Athenian power and the fear which this caused in Sparta. He warns that the same dynamic could drive the centuries rising empire, China, and the United States into a war, neither once. Allison calls this the Thucydides trap, and it's a question haunting some very important people in the Trump administration, particularly as Chinese officials arrived Wednesday for the diplomatic and security dialogue. So here's the point, you guys. You know, our top military guys, they go through the War College. And what do? They go through the masters of war. Some of these guys have won wars, some of these guys have lost wars, and they do strategic analysis. They learn about strategic analysis. They learn about strategic theory. And so they go through every war and they apply these principles that came through the Peloponnesian Wars. You can read the books for yourself. I had to read them. My junior years and my junior high years, and also in high school. So that's where I learned that. You know, you learn the differences between the different armies, what they're capable of doing, and then how do you tackle that? What is it that you do? It is phenomenal. So if you look at, you can actually, what they do is they go through and they'll tell you why the Japanese lost, why the Germans lost, and you'll be able to measure it yourself. Well, the reason I'm telling you guys this stuff and throwing this, not only is it interesting what Trump's doing, because we don't want to get into a war just because of the fear of China's growth. You know, we want to be able to do checks and balances. You know, it might be completely avoidable. We might be lying to ourselves. Their growth might not be. It's a threat, of course, because you're always competing. But we want to make sure that we know what we're doing. That's what's remarkable about these guys bringing this guy up, and Trump and his team bringing these guys up, because that's the only way you can measure this stuff. The guys who put down on paper, how do you measure this politics? What do you need to do to be able to put together their overall strategy? And then from that strategy, how do you build the operations, and then how do you build the tactics? And these guys are doing it from the top down. Very remarkable. But there's something to learn there from for you guys. So here's a couple of books for you. One's Makers of Modern Strategy, and Makers of Modern Strategy, and the other one is The Evolution of Strategy. And you guys, there's tons of books out there on this stuff, but those are the ones that will probably give you the widest range of what it means and how to do it. And if you understand how these generals and these militaries, especially in the West, how they think, where they got their information from, how they did a net assessment, how they, you do that for business, you do that for yourself. But what these guys are is that they are authors of realism. There's a term for it. Let me see if I can find it here. I'll be able to put it up and I'll set it up in the link so you guys can see it. But these guys are like the authors of realism. So what does that mean? There's no mysticism. There's no moralism. There's nothing. They just take exactly what they can see and what they calculate, and they go from there. Well, you guys, that's what I've been preaching to you guys, especially the people who've been listening to me for about 7-8 years. Yeah, forget about everything else. Only calculate what is tangible, what you can prove. The rest is garbage. Guess what? You live in a completely different world when you do that. An absolute, completely different world. It's an absolute reality. And most people can't do that. Most people have never been taught that. Most people didn't know there was such a thing. But it's very, very valuable. And you use those strategies in investing. You use those strategies, and you can use it in religion and moral, being moral. What's the reality? What is it that you're afraid of? Is it even real? All that stuff. You can use that and do net assessment and strategic analysis. But the whole point is they give you tools of measure, and that's what we're after. It's the beginning for you if you can understand what these guys are talking about and go through the Peloponnesian Wars and find out what this gentleman who actually wrote this, genius, one of the smartest people that ever lived, and a historian, not only are you going to find out what the Spartans and the Athens did to each other, but the tactics and the thoughts. And this guy breaks it down to, what's a good leader compared to how do you judge a good leader? How do you know? What tools do you need to be able to measure that? And that's pretty cool. I mean, that's the beginning of it. And that's what we learned in the program that I went through. So you remember, I talked about before, the goal was empirical data. But how do you get empirical data? You can't just say, well, I'm going to go get empirical data. You got to have tools. You got to have methods. I mean, how did everybody else get the empirical data? Where does the empirical data come from? How do you ask the right questions? What if nobody knows how? And somebody asks you, well, I need to find this information. Nobody has that data. You can't just say, well, nobody had it. There was no reference. You got to be able to create it yourself. That's the point. That's the step that's never been taught. I'm not on any educational level. So, I mean, there's very few schools on strategic theory out there. I think it's MIT, Yale, Georgetown, and
the War College.
Yeah, War College. Thanks, Bob. Thank you very much.
Yep.
And so where do they go through the War College? They go through policy, strategy, operations, and tactics. The junior officers in the United States military, they're in charge of operations and tactics. The senior officers are in charge of policy and strategy. And there's a ton of language there that you'll learn that'll be able to put you in the right direction. But anyways, Bob, do you have anything to add to this?
Yeah, I do. There's another book that I know you had me read I really enjoyed a lot, was The Next 100 Years. And when you begin to take a look at how to analyze stuff, I know oftentimes I phrase that analyze because sometimes it feels like it's that way. But to go in and actually research it based upon only strategies based on numbers and history. I mean, history is really the key because you're going to learn how things function. I mean, it's no different than anything else you pick up. You take fishing, okay? You're going to go fishing to where you know where the fish are at, you know what they're going to utilize, and you test things and you work it and you work it and you work it and you work it till you get it down pat. And you're always successful in your fishing efforts, or at least for the most part. And it's the same thing here. When you allow yourself, and then one more time, I know Tony talks about this, and moving out of the emotional space, which seems to be the primary conduit of all news media and the radicals on the left-hand side, and getting out of that space and only going with the numbers, just the numbers. This is why it works. And it's important for you to understand that. Tony's espoused it. I've espoused it. It's the same thing all the time. You have to go by that. You cannot let the emotional side of this get carried away and run over you. And this is where the news media and the left is in so much trouble right now. People have learned, and they are still learning. All of the rhetoric that comes from that side, the emotional, incensed perspective, doesn't have the hard facts. They love to rely on the emotion to get things riled up. And that's where we have all of this mess that's going on. Yes, these books that Tony's talking about here, we will have those posted on there with the author's name, so it'll be easier for you to find. And I highly recommend you check with a local library, or if you can buy it online, whatever's going to work for you. But read them. It's going to surprise you what's there.
Yeah, no, Bob, excellent. Thank you so much. You guys, I'll go more in depth in it because you'll be able to understand. It's like, where does this guy, I know when we went through, I went through 2.5 years on tour meeting you people, a lot of people that have been listening to me. And I would just, I'd throw a little bit of information out, and then I would do a question, and people were like, how are you coming up with this stuff? And then they go out and check it. That's the thing that's remarkable, is they go out and check it, which I'm proud of them for doing. And they find out that everything that I said is right. You guys, I'm not right. The information is just there. I can't take claim that it's right because of me. You know what I mean? I just went out and find the correct information, and that's what's remarkable about it. So, but it clarifies everything. It makes life that much easier. It makes life that much fuller. I know it sounds kumbaya-ish, or like it's a religion, but that's what it's all about. There's so much noise. There's so much noise. Look at all the stuff that you've listened to over your life. How much does it come true? Most of the stuff, these books these people write on the end of the world, or, what's going to happen when this president gets elected, or, you guys, I mean, where did it go? Where did all that information go? It was garbage. It was all garbage. So how do you get out of that? How do you depend on yourself? And then you can come up with, exactly, if you start put in these tactics. I probably went through 2 or 3 pieces of paper to figure out that Comey was the guy who was leaking. And this was before he even came out that he leaked. He leaked in the paper. They're like, how do you do that? Well, I didn't know for sure, but guess what? The numbers were against him. Nobody else could have those that information. Nobody else could pivot that type of information in the way that he did. And so, it's that simple. And it's not that big of a deal. It's not because I'm talented, because I'm telling you, the guys that I hang out with had the exact same math, the exact same information. They had the exact same net assessment on, what's going on. It's like, there's something fishy here. And, we didn't know exactly what it was, but we knew that it was coming from Comey. We knew he was the guy. We didn't know on exactly how it was going to come out, like the idea that he was going to get in trouble. I still can't believe it. Bob and I were having a conversation. I mean, I've never seen anybody shoot themselves in the foot like that before. I just never see it, especially someone in the FBI. I mean, the guy's a lawyer, So anyways, it's pretty amazing, but we'll come out with a lot more information. The maps that I'm putting together, when you start going through and you start watching the different pieces on the map move like puzzles over time, you guys are going to realize, because I'm going to throw in there a lot of history on what the people that were doing this, what they were thinking, what was on the table for them. Why did it move like this? So what was the mindset of Russia as it was moving forward? What's the mindset of Russia as it's moving backwards? What's Russia's mindset today? What are they after? Why is Russia in the Middle East? Why is the United States in the Middle East? What's the reality? What can we do? What can Russia do? What can Syria do? What can Sunni and Shia versus each other? What can they do? What are their options? You guys, there's answers. There's answers, but you got to be able to put the correct information on the table, and that's what these guys are trying to teach you. That's why all these books and all that stuff are written. So very, very cool stuff. But anyways, Bob, you know what? I'm super, super tired. I haven't slept in a couple days, so I know I made a lot of mistakes in this audio, but that's about it. I just wanted to do just touch bases with the crowd.
Well, you did great, Tony. One thing else I want people to realize, too, is you begin this transition from allowing the news media to convey what their version of the truth is. I know that earlier I had posted a series of videos on our website in regards to watching what the news media response was when Trump won. And to me, that seemed to be really, seriously, the first step that America began to realize, holy cow, because the people really, really seriously are ready for that change that we've been waiting for, to bring business back into town, to rectify these issues that have been kind of ramping themselves up under the media and the liberal side of life. And so, it is time for those changes, and you're watching them unfold in front of you, folks. So, those maps that Tony's been talking about, I know he's been working hard on those and on his books, which are coming up shortly. I mean, real shortly. And they're going to just totally give you an education way beyond anything you're going to get from college, from anywhere else. You're going to get an education that's going to be able to unleash your ability. And that's the right word, unleash it. Unleash your ability to be able to make choices, to do things that are going to be of greater value to you, your family, your community, because you'll understand things the way they really truly are. What's the history? What's the leaning? Where are they going? It's going to amaze you. I know it's coming up here, folks. Tony, I know that on this note, it's time for us to call a close to our particular presentation today. Thank you very much for being here, everybody. Tony, get some rest. I'm also going to need to get from you some information on those books, and we'll get those posted up here with our current video that we're doing right now. So on that note, folks, we're going to call it a day. You betcha.
Thanks for having me, Bob.
You bet. It's never a problem. And on that note, we will see you guys later. Thanks for listening, and now we get to listen to you. Your comments, questions, and suggestions are the inspiration of our research efforts. We highly encourage you to call in and leave your thoughts on our 24-hour phone line at 541-946-8721.